Hello and welcome to The Chosen Few, the one and only place for you. My name is Isabel Santine, and in today's tutorial video, we are going to check out how to use the Vidicon Tube camera emulator in Save version 1.0. So the first thing you want to make sure you have before you get started with this process is that you have a video clip in MP4 format, or pretty much any other kind of video file that is common enough to work in FFmpeg. So MP4, MKV, MPEG files, they'll all work. So make sure you have that video file, and what you're going to do is make sure you know where that is. I just have it on my desktop for ease of access. So next, we're going to go to our save.core.main tool folder from the previous tutorial video where I showed how to install Save. And we're going to open a terminal from that folder. And another note that you're going to want to make before we get started is whether your video file contains HDR color or not. Now, the details on how you figure that out are pretty specific, and you're going to have to look at the related tutorials for whatever video editor you exported your file from. But so long as you know whether it has HDR color or not, you can proceed with this tutorial. So what we're going to do is type, So what we're going to do here is start typing a command. So if you're unfamiliar with command line interfaces, basically Save is a command line interface-based tool, which means you use it and all of its features by typing commands that have different values that you can adjust called parameters. So, for example, let me explain what all these different parameters are. So I just passed the -h parameter to it, which basically just tells the tool to print some helpful information about the different options that you can use. So right here we have -i, which represents the input file. So basically, we start with to build a command, we start with the name of an executable. Then we start specifying these parameters one by one, separated by spaces. So let's start with -i. So we type -i and then another space. The reason why we put a -i first is to tell the program this is what the value of the input file is going to be. And of course it will take a file path in, which we can literally just drag and drop here very easily. And make sure to put that file path in quotes if it contains any spaces, but in this case it doesn't, so we'll be fine with that. The next step is to specify whether your file has HDR color or not. As you can see here, we have the HDR color flag. So we'll type -HDR for our file. If your file didn't contain HDR color, you wouldn't type this flag at all, and you'd proceed by typing a space and then whatever is next. In our example, that would be -J. But we're going to put -HDR here for the purposes of this tutorial. And -HDR is just an on or off parameter, so it doesn't need a value passed to it. So we don't need to put anything like true or false here after HDR. So next we're going to type -J. And this is where it gets tricky. So start off by typing a double quote character, and to use the Vidicon tube, what you're going to do is type V /cam /vidicon.simple. This tells Save which module you want to use for your processing, and you can chain these modules together, which I'll demonstrate in the next video in this series. But for now, after vidicon.simple, simply type an equal sign. Now, it's time to specify each of our parameters for the Vidicon tube. So if we go to the Chosen Few software documentation website, we can go over to camera modules to see the parameters that we would be passing to the Vidicon tube module. So in this case, our parameters are black level, white level, red channel capacitance, which is R, green channel capacitance, which is G, blue channel capacitance, which is B, and the decay threshold, which is shortened as thresh. Now, you can read the detailed descriptions of each of these with the link in the description, but all you need to know is the parameters we'll be adjusting today are white level, R, G, and B, and I'll explain what each of these parameters do with a hands-on example. So to start, let's go ahead and type white level first. So we'll type in the name of the parameter, and then another equal sign. Next, we'll pass in a value between 0 and 1. It can be any continuous number between 0 and 1, so it'll have to have a decimal point. So let's do 0.80, which specifies our default maximum exposure level for the camera sensor as 80% of the full range of the colors that are being provided from the video file. Next, we'll type a colon to start specifying the next parameter, which in our case will be the red channel capacitance. Now you might be asking, what is capacitance? In the context of this emulator, the red channel, green channel, and blue channel capacitance values represent how long it takes for ghost trails for each independent color channel to fade away. So let's go ahead and specify 15.50 for our red channel capacitance. Next, we'll put another colon, G equals 12.50. And you can make these numbers whatever you want for your input file. I'm just using these as an example to make it seem more practical and give it more context. Now let's specify the blue channel capacitance, which is B equals 17.50. All right, now we've specified all of the parameters we want to specify. Now, a quick note about the white level parameter. If we set it all the way to 1, it basically makes it so that our Vidicon tube will never blow out beyond its sensor capacity, which basically makes it so that there's never any ghost trails at all. So you always want to set this less than 1 and greater than 0. The closer to 0 you set it, the more intense your ghost trails will be, and the brighter your footage will look. So a good 80% for this video game clip will do just fine. Now, close the job string, which is what this is what we typed just now. Close the job string with another double quote character. So your command should look exactly like this right now, except for maybe removing the -HDR in case your footage doesn't have HDR color. And of course, you can change any of these numbers in the command if you want, but make sure you keep all the parameter names and equal signs intact and in order. And finally, we'll specify a -CRF parameter for our command. And I'll set that to 16 because our footage is in 4K. Basically, the CRF, or constant rate factor of your output, determines the constant visual quality that it will maintain. So the lower you set your CRF until 0, the higher quality your footage will be, but also the bigger the output file will be. So there's a bit of a trade-off. And that's our command. So now all we have to do is specify an output file name, which I'll put it also on the desktop. Despite the fact that your input file can be any kind of video file, the output file always has to be an MP4. So that's what your last argument will be. Notice how we don't have something like -output here. That's basically because it's the last piece of the command. We can basically just assume that it's the output file name. Now, all we have to do is hit enter. And voila! We are using the Vidicon Tube emulator. And you can also cancel whatever you're running and preview the output so far by pressing Ctrl-C, and it will safely close the video file for you to view the output. Now let's check out what our results look like. Alright, so that looks pretty great. Now let's see what else we can do. Let's try playing around with just the white level parameter. Let's change this 0.80 to 0.85 to represent 85% exposure, and leave everything else the same. As you may have noticed, the trails were much less intense, almost invisible, so this parameter can be quite sensitive depending on your footage. Now let's try going on the lower end, 75%. Whoa, that looks like it's a bit too much, so we'll just leave it at 80% for the rest of these tests. Next, let's isolate the red channel capacitance and have no ghosting on any of the other channels. We'll do this by setting the G and B parameters to 0. And always make sure that you don't have an existing file that you're going to be overwriting with the file name that you put at the end of the command. So for example, we already have this readout HDR output file on the desktop, but if I run this command again, it will automatically overwrite the file that I already have there. So if you want to just adjust the parameters of your command and keep the file name the same, make sure to make a backup copy somewhere else of the output each time before you run the next command. Alright, now let's go ahead and do just the green channel. So set the green back to 12.50 and set the red to 0.0. Alright, cool. And now to finish up our example and our video, let's do the same for the blue channel. Before, it was set to 17.50. Alright, perfect. That concludes this tutorial video. I hope you found this advice and tutorial practical and easy to follow. As always, you can join the Chosen Few Software Discord server by accessing your Patreon benefits on the Patreon website, so long as you have a Supporter Plus tier subscription to Chosen Few Software over there. I'll leave a link to all the relevant materials in the description. Thanks for watching!